everyone. Welcome to this session on local efforts on financing, climate adaptation, and risk reduction lessons from Africa. Since we're at the hour, I'm just going to get us started since we do have a lot to cover today. My name is Yoko Okura. I am the program manager for the Zurich Flood Resilience work at Mercy Corps, and I also serve as the Asia Climate Advisor. And this session is in joint cooperation with the International Center for Climate Change and Development, Mercy Corps, and the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance. And we do also have the privilege of having a government official from Nepal with us, Mr. Krishna Humagain, from the Environment and Disaster Management section of the Ministry of Federal Affairs and General Administration. Some quick housekeeping. I think we've been in this conference long enough, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but please do mute your mic unless you are speaking. And when you are speaking, please do unmute. If the connection seems to be quite unstable, please do turn off your video, especially if you're not speaking. And this link for the Zoom, please don't share on your social media accounts. You can share what we're discussing, of course, but because this link is for the CBA participants, please do refrain from sharing on social media to prevent Zoom bombing, as we say. Okay, with that, I think we will go to a Mentimeter. I think my colleague will share a link in the chat box to kind of get an idea of who we are in this session. So yeah, if you could, Jewel, share the link in the chat box so people can respond. And the first question is on gender. Can people see the link to the Mentimeter? Yeah, it's here. So there's been a message from Shireen. So if you could please access it and use the code 96816224 here. Right. It's nice to see we're almost at gender parity. It seems like we have a nice balance of both male and female colleagues.
Can I shift the next slide?
Yeah, sure. Please, let's go to the next question to kind of get an idea of what kinds of organizations that our participants are from. So I think if you can just refresh your Mentimeter screen, the second question will pop up. Great. So we do have this being a community-based adaptation conference, a lot of representation from civil society and the NGO sector. It's nice we have a donor organization and also quite a few folks from academia. So yes, everyone is very welcome. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, so this session is about local financing. I know there's been a few sessions at CBA and the topic of climate finance has come up a few times. This session will focus on two main components. The first component with a presentation from Saja Nipani on local government financing in Nepal as a case study, and we will have a response from Mr. Krishna Humagain, who is a government official in Nepal. And then the presentation will next move on to Shireen, who will give us an overview of a really innovative small grant project that she led, and where small community organizations received funds to be able to invest in climate adaptation activities. And so we will hear from the actual recipients of the grants to see, how did they use the funds, what were the opportunities and challenges. And in the end, we'll open the group to an open discussion and a Q&A. Please do drop in any questions you have as we speak, and I'll do my best to get to all of them in the session. And so no breakout rooms. This is a quite simple plenary session for this event. So I think over to you, Sajan. If you could lead us through on a case study of local level finance in Nepal.
Thank you very much, Yoko. I would like to share my screen. Thank you very much. I'm Sajan Neopane, working as a policy and advocacy specialist for Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance here in Merseychord, Nepal. I'd like to share about how the local efforts on risk reduction and climate change and climate adaptation financing is done, especially with our work with the local governments as a part of Alliance work in Nepal. So the general overview of the presentation looks like I'll share about the overview of resource allocation, research and local government climate financing that we did as a part of our work. What are the challenges we are seeing and what could be the possible ways forward? So in Nepal, there are three.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sajan. Are you sharing your screen? And if so, is it just me that can't see, or can people see a screen? No, right? I think if you could share your screen, would be great. I think it's not showing.
Sorry for the
no worries.
error. Yeah, is it visible now?
Yes, it's visible. I think you
Sorry.
just need to get it to the beginning and make it in presentation mode, since we're kind of looking at your whole web. Right.
Is it okay?
For me, not yet.
Just a minute.
Maybe start from the beginning and go on a presentation mode. That would be easier.
Now is it okay, I think?
Yes. Great. Okay. Thank you, Sajan.
Sorry for the technical error. So I'm Sajan Neopane. I'll be sharing on the work that we have done with the local governments in Nepal on how local efforts, especially the local governments, are investing or are putting their efforts on climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction financing. The overview of my presentation is how the resource allocation is done at local level, especially with the municipalities and rural municipalities. I'll share some of the findings of research done on local government climate financing and the challenges that we see and possible ways forward. So at Nepal, we have three tiers of government, and after the federalization, the local governments, municipalities and rural municipalities are the first are that tier of government which works closely with the communities, especially all the community related activities, including activities on risk reduction and climate adaptation, are led by the local government's annual planning and budgeting process. So in order to understand how the budget allocation is done by the local governments on climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction, we try to see the general overview of the public spending made by local governments on this sector. We conducted research on 7 municipalities. The objective was to increase awareness of the public spending by local governments and to create the shared understanding on how this budgeting is done. So the methodology generally looks like this. We reviewed most of the annual development plans and programs and the budget made on climate adaptation and risk reduction, as well as disaster management. The policies and guidelines formulated by the municipalities were also reviewed, and some of the interviews were conducted with the federal, province, and local government. So to see the budget allocation, basically we have in Nepal, we have the local government have environment and disaster management sections at their annual planning and budgeting cycle. The most of the focus activities that are conducted on risk reduction and climate adaptation are fall under this heading, but there are several other activities which brings co-benefits like infrastructure, agriculture, or several other activities which focus on climate adaptation and risk reduction, but doesn't fall under environment and disaster management heading. So this kind of budget allocation is primarily done on through the annual planning process by the municipalities. So the results on our research became quite interesting. What we have seen is like when we saw this result, we were also quite surprised to see, and when we shared with the local government officials, they were also quite surprised, because the perception is that we have been investing in more in the climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction activities, but the primary investment can be seen as very insignificant in terms of the total budget. The primary investment was made on our research. We found that from 0.9 to 3.8 percentage of the annual budget was allocated on disaster management and environment related budget hedging, which is termed as the primary budget allocation. If we see at the investment made according to the disaster management cycle, the large amount of the investment is seen in response and mitigation, which is seen as post-event activities, especially for floods, or kind of mitigation activities made in that year, especially for the infrastructure related. It can be dams, bridges, or culverts that has been designed and made in that particular year. But the thing we can see is that preparedness part, where the resilience building activity, especially with the preparedness of the local communities on the expenditure made on this has been quite less as compared to the response and mitigation activities in the municipalities that we saw, that we conducted our research. So the challenges is what could be the possible, what are the challenges that we see in local financing, especially because this is the case where we conducted our research and the areas where we are working. The priority is given on the investment that demonstrate immediate or highly visible result. That can be infrastructure, especially focus on more infrastructure, like bridges, dams, culverts that has been made. But there is a gap in knowledge how to integrate climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction into these broader development planning or activities. So this has been a priority or the major challenge in our working areas, especially in the municipalities and rural municipalities. And as stated in the previous our research finding, it has been difficult to track the activity-wise spending of climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction activities, because the expenses are shown in sector like environment, disaster management. We can see you can see like around 5% or 6% of the amount is spent on the environment and disaster management section in that particular year, but whether that is spent on response or that is spent on the preparedness, so that has been a bit difficult to understand on our annual tracking on the expenses tracking of the local government. And monitoring and evaluation of the activities, especially it has been limited. It has been limited due to focus on meeting annual budget targets. The activities are implemented, and the impact of the activities, how the activity impacted the community, what is the result or the output of the activity that has been implemented on climate adaptation and risk reduction. So this has been very less limited in the areas where we have worked and we have found. It might be it might not be same for other municipalities, but this has been seen in most of the areas where the focus is much more on to meet the annual budget targets. And the next is engaging private sector for climate adaptation activities. What we have seen as a challenge, like private sector, the opportunities for the private sector to engage in the climate adaptation is a bit not clear. They want to see how the community engagement, how the private sector engagement will bring in climate adaptation activities, how the diversification has been done. So this has been much more discussed in our other sectors, other CBA sessions where private sector has been priority. So we can take one of the key challenges here as well. So on way forward, how we can incentivize how we can improve local financing on climate adaptation, disaster risk reduction is like incentivizing local government investment through policies. So this policy framework or improved policy can be a good way to incentivize local governments in investment, like we saw in our like in our finding, when we presented our research finding to the local government officials as well as provincial government officials on the annual investment and the investment in CCA and DRR. So they were also, that brought us a momentum and advocacy to work with the provincial government that last year to develop a major DRM policy, disaster risk management policy, which also included climate adaptation opportunities. So that policy mandated the local governments and the provincial agencies to spend annual 5% of the total budget on disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation activity. Though we can see policy improvement is one of the, it brings it is not, it cannot be a, it could not be a like a direct way on like improving how local finance can improve, but this can be seen, this is seen as a very good incentivizer, so that the policy framework binds or that brings the local governments and the provincial agencies to mandate their annual or budgeting annual budget and plan on disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation activities. The next one, what we can see is like the guidelines on project activities with budget amount. So there are several guidelines being prepared by the local government, which have a very, which gives a high level overview of the activities that can be implemented. But the small scale activities like nature-based solution, if we can, if you want to apply for the flood control or any climate smart agriculture. So small scale guidelines where we can, where the national level government can focus on these guidelines, and NGOs help in translating or sharing that guidelines with the community so that they can implement the activity with the amount of the budget and with the specific outcome of the project. So these kind of guidelines will certainly help the local governments to build, local communities to build their resilience, and also the local governments can focus on how these guidelines bring will be able to help them in annual planning and budgeting, especially on improving local level climate and disaster financing. And engagement opportunities between market actors and local governments, especially we can see like there are various opportunities that can be led by the market actors like private sector, insurance agents, or various kind of service providers. So the linkage between these two local government, these two agencies it will be quite much more beneficial for the small scale holders, farmers, or the people who are affected from the people uh, uh, who will be the primary beneficiary of this product. So there is a need of facilitation by the NGOs and the local governments, so that so that these market actors can provide their wider service to the affected communities, and mostly on the products that will help climate resilience, as well as that will also increase the local level investment from the non-government side, especially from the private sector side, on these climate adaptation and local disaster risk reduction measures. Thank you. That brings to end of my presentation. So I'll be looking forward for your questions and feedbacks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sajan. So from here, I like to open the questions to the floor, but we are very lucky to have Mr. Krishna Humanagain from the Ministry of Federal Affairs from Nepal with us, specifically from the disaster management section. I have a lot of people on my screen and not sure where you are. If you could perhaps unmute your mic and great. Okay, I see you here. Thank you very much for joining us. We're really lucky to have you here. I think it would be great if you could start with a general reflection on what was just discussed from Sajan.
Sorry for Namaste everybody. I am Krishna. My Ministry of Federal Affairs and General University, Nepal. I am working as a section officer.
Sorry, sir. The connection is breaking out pretty badly. I think maybe if we could turn off our videos just to help with the connection. Yeah, if you could perhaps turn off the video, it might help, including people who are listening, perhaps.
Sajan sir.
Yes, Krishna sir.
First question.
हजुरको भिडियो अफ गरिदिनु भयो भने बरु हुन्छ कि भनेर अलिक क्लियर आउँछ कि भनेर सर.
Second question को भन्दिनु मैले.
Yuko, can you please share question again to Krishna sir?
Yeah, sure. So if you could give an overall reflection of the presentation, especially focusing on how the national government is supporting local governments on climate finance.
The presentation which is presented by Sajan. I'm going to what are possible opportunities that can be scaled from the global tries to decentralize in my
Krishna, sir, I'm really sorry, but we cannot hear you at all because of the connection. I think maybe I will drop some questions in the chat box that perhaps you could answer to typing. I'm really sorry of the connection technical difficulties. And perhaps while you're taking a look,
Krishna sir. हजुरको एकदम साउन्ड ब्रेक भइरहेछ. अहिले हजुरलाई क्वेशन चाहिँ च्याट बक्समा पठाउनुहुन्छ, त्यहाँ हजुरले टाइप गरिदिनु भयो भने अनि अहिले एकछिनमा फेरि कनेक्सन भएपछि हामी फेरि रन गरौँला भनेर.
हुन्छ सर.
Okay, Yoko, we can connect with him later if his connection will be.
Great. Yeah, I'm really sorry about this. Okay, so I think we have a few questions actually from the chat box. If Sajan, you could answer. So we have a question from Vincent. I'm interested to understand how much flexibility the local governments in Nepal have with respect to federal government prioritization of spend. So actually this would have been a perfect question for our guests to answer. But yeah, what is the flexibility of local governments and how much autonomous decision-making power do they have?
Yes, so I can take that. Especially as after the federalization in 2015, so the local governments are fully autonomous on their decision making. So they can prioritize their needs, and they can decide on their based on the community level needs and the prioritization. The planning process in Nepal is quite participatory. It starts from settlement level to the ward level, and then to the municipal level. So all this planning process brings in the voices and the needs from the community level, so that the local governments can decide, and that is based on their priority and the need of the activities related to climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction. And next is regarding the there are some of the guidelines and the standards being shared by the national federal government, especially on how to plan, or that will serve only as a guideline or as a framework. Most of even the guidelines that can be adapted to their needs as per the local context. Like we have the federal government will share the model guideline for disaster management law, or the environment conservation law for the local government. But the local governments that can decide, the local government council can decide about about what the requirements are and what are the needs based on the local context. And for spending patterns, so there are some of the grants are made on the conditional grants, especially if, conditional grants. The conditional grants are meant to be spent as per the federal regulations that has been shared by annually, but other unconditional grants that has been provided by the federal government, and the grants and the revenue collected from the local government's own authority and administration, that the local government can prioritize and mobilize according to their needs and priority. I hope I answered your question correctly.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question. There's a question asking, why are market actors needed? How would they contribute to climate financing, disaster risk reduction, climate adaptation activities?
Yes, especially market actors like private sectors, where we can see in Nepal, so there are various kind of private sector working at community level, from large scale industry or corporate to the small scale private sector like cooperatives or various level of small scale producers. So these market actors have a very varied diversified services that they can provide. One, we can see like a micro insurance schemes, which are directly related with farmer, and which focuses on crop insurance and wildlife damage insurance. So these kind of insurance schemes are vital for the small scale smallholder farmers, especially on their like for the crop insurance has been a vital. If we see in the once the farmer gives once the farmer have planted the crop, and if some hydroclimatic event or disaster or any climatic or any other agricultural disease that infests the crops, so the farmers will be able to get compensation of that crops. So that can be seen as a very that can add a value, especially for climate adaptation as well. And for risk reduction, if the landslide or flood damage the farmers, like sugarcane crop farmers have done their insurance, or the private sector have provides insurance for sugarcane farmers based on their on harvest. So if at the time of harvest, if the flood or any hydroclimatic event damage their product, they can claim the insurance. So this is one example. There are several examples that the private sector can play a role on adding value to DRI and CCA, I think.
Great. We have a lot of really excellent questions in the chat. We do have room for a discussion at the end of the session, and I think some may be answered through the next section, where we will hear from community-based organizations that have used funds to implement adaptation activities. I'm really sorry we weren't able to have Mr. Krishna with us online, but he did send me a message on the question of national government, local government support. His answer is that the national government has a big role in supporting local governments to develop policies and plans and formulation, and especially on capacity building. And because Nepal has recently also gone through a governance change where from a centralized approach to decentralized approach. So there's a lot of guidance from the national government on how they can be devising policies and actually rolling out service delivery. Okay, so with that, I am going to hand over to my team member for this session, Shireen, who will give a short presentation of a really innovative and interesting approach project that she led on a small grant. And she will then facilitate a discussion with the actual recipients of the grant. So over to you, Shireen.
Thank you so much, Yoko. I hope you all can see my slides. My name is Shireen Mannan, and I work for International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICAD, as a senior research officer, and I'm based in Dhaka, Bangladesh. First of all, thank you everyone for joining our session and really actively participating in the chat box. As Yoko said, we'll try to answer to these questions and comments by the later half of the session. But as of now, we have learned from Sajan's presentation, like what are the main tools or mechanisms of public finance or local government level finance to climate adaptation or DRR. What are the challenges? What are the way or what are the opportunities or maybe the way forwards that Sajan's study has put forward? But we really think that there are scopes for some innovative, for bringing up some innovative financing mechanisms, either by the the donors, the multilateral, bilateral organizations, or maybe by the civil society organizations as well, that can really help enhance the local level adaptation and resilience. So one such opportunity that ICAD, Global Resilience Partnership, and Climate Justice and Resilience Fund have put forward is called the Small Grants Program. So just to give a little bit of background of the program, we all know that people who are working on climate change, adaptation, and resilience, throughout the year, they actually come together and gather around different conferences like the CBA conference. During the middle of the year, we have the Gobeshona Global Conference happening at the beginning, and then we have the COPs and BNC days by the end of the year. So these community of practice of different disciplines, different backgrounds, different countries actually come together during these conferences. And when these conferences used to happen physically, they used to, sit over a cup of tea, chat, and discuss about really interesting ideas and develop plans and etc. to, really work further with each other. But when they go back to their countries or their workplaces, first of all, they often, don't get the motivation to work around these issues because they have their own work to do. And secondly, there is definitely a lack of finance, so they don't feel the drive to work on these ideas. And that way, all these ideas actually stay behind. We cannot really work on them. So basically, through the Small Grants Program, we wanted to mobilize these collaborative and transdisciplinary teams and really give them a push to really work towards a common goal between such events, and also to provide them a platform and vehicle to actually solicit ideas, pitch proposals, and avail these small grants to really make a mark and make a change at the very ground level. So we actually started the Small Grants Program from this year's January during the Gobeshona Global Conference, which took place from 18th to 25th of January. And we started the program with an objective to really create a greater sustained collaboration among these southern-based groups of academics and non-academics, grassroots practitioners, through some targeted investments so that they can implement these ideas and, make one step further. Maybe from that point of time, they can again build up on their ideas and really apply for larger grants or better opportunities. So for the process, what we did is we actually circulated a call for interest before the Gobeshona conference, and we have received a lot of interest coming from different parts of the world. And then with all of them, we actually hosted a pre-conference networking session where we actually, created a platform where all these people, some were grassroots organizations, some were private sectors, academics, researchers, non-government organizations. They really met each other, discussed about their ideas, their interests, and then formed a, group of each group consisted of 3 members. And then throughout the conference, they actually attended different sessions which are relevant to their ideas. And over the time, they developed a small 1-pager abstract, and then they sent us these abstract. The preliminary stage, they sent us the abstract. We actually had an expert panel with some predetermined criteria, and we selected the top 10 groups with the top 10 ideas. And then we actually hosted the Gobeshona conference on an interactive platform called HOVA. And then we put actually these top 10 ideas on the HOVA platform and actually asked all the registered participants to vote for the top 5 winning teams, because we wanted the selection to be really participatory and fair and not, being biased by us or someone, else. So actually within 24 hours, we received, in fact, more than 1,400 votes, and we got our top 5 winning teams. And they are currently working on their project. And this project, the first half of, the first part of this project will run for 1 year. It has started from January this year, and it will end on January next year when the Gobeshona conference will take place. And each group will actually receive a grant worth of USD 5,000, which is actually really a small grant for 3 persons. But the grant is essentially to, foster the collaboration and networking. They might not be able to make really, ground-making change or any big research or something like that, but this grant is to really, charge them up, foster the collaboration within the countries, within different partners, so that they can build on this partnership and later can apply for bigger grants and bigger funds. So these are the top 5 winning teams. I'll have them all joining for a discussion session right after my presentation. So I'll not go in detail about all these, members, but very briefly, you can see 5 different groups, people joining in from different countries, and the ideas and concepts are also really different. So like we have group 8, where we have, members from Bangladesh and South Africa, and they're working on informal urban settlements because they thought that is a really interesting idea to work on. Then we have groups from the mountains of Nepal and India who are working on empowering women about climate risk. Then we have a very interesting one from Bangladesh Shield Tracks, which is the indigenous group, and they are working on building the capacity and knowledge of indigenous children on climate change. We have a group from Southeast Asia working on urban farming and really forming a network of nature. And finally, we also have a youth-led group joining in from Tanzania, Zambia, and Bangladesh, working on the knowledge management and networking hub. So as you can see, the groups are really different. The topics are really diverse. So we thought it is a very interesting way to, connect the dots and bring the people who are working on a common agenda to under one roof on one platform and really work on something which can be equally beneficial to all the member countries. And as we are working on the current, batch of the grantees, we thought that the grant or this tool was really effective in terms of enhancing local adaptation or resilience. So we thought of launching another round from this CBA, and this time we are calling it the Catalytic grants. This time again, GRP, CJRF, and ECAD is actually, has launched this next round. And this time we will be able to provide or award grant to top 3 winning teams. The amount is same. This is worth of USD 5,000. And we have opened a Slack channel dedicated for this, grant, which is called the Catalytic grant. So if you are on the Slack platform, please join this channel. And, if you are interested, please try to meet and network with people who are registered for this conference and develop ideas and apply for the grant. I hope my colleague Emma will put on the information and application link in the chat box. I can see because I'm sharing the screen, but you will still have some time after the conference is over, because the conference is ending on 18, but the submission to submit the proposal is 2nd of July. So you'll still have some chance to, get back to these people that you have met during this conference and, really organize yourselves and develop ideas and submit, because I feel this is a really exciting opportunity for people, particularly from the grassroots, to apply for this grant and make a change. Thank you. I'll end here, Yoko, and if with your permission, I'll go right away to the discussion sessions because we have the grantees with us. So I'll start the discussion with these top 5 teams. We have the members with us today, and this will be a discussion style. I'll ask them a few questions, basically first to discuss about their project in general, and then we are also happy to take questions from the comment box. If you have any questions directly to these groups or maybe about the process, please feel free to put it on the chat box. So with that note, I'll start with group 1. Melanie, I hope you're with us. So maybe if you can unmute yourself and discuss it. You have 2 minutes, so each group will have 2 minutes time. So please introduce yourself, your group mates, countries, and in a very gist, what is your project about and the components. Thank you.
And I will switch off my camera because my network is unstable. But yes, so my name is Melanie Chirwa, and I am from Lusaka, Zambia. I work with an organization called People's Process on Housing and Poverty in Zambia, an affiliate of Slum Dwellers International. And in my group, I also have Sohana Raman. He works with an organization called Youth Net for Climate Justice, as well as Jerry Danny, who is with Sustainable Environment Management, another organization. So together we are conducting our project, which is titled Enhancing Youth-Led Climate Adaptation, Knowledge Management and Networking Hub. So the aim of our project is to bring young people together and to tell stories about climate change adaptation. What we identified is that within communities, there are a lot of innovations, a lot of strategies that come from communities, and there's a lot of rich knowledge that doesn't go out and get heard. So we have come together to share that information. And so also we're getting young people together who will get organized and will receive training on climate change and climate change adaptation, and also on how to record these stories and present them to the world. And that information we'll use as an advocacy tool, and also as a means to leverage resources from the various stakeholders, which include local governments. We look at other cooperating partners, and to also raise the profile of locally led solutions. So that is what our project is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. That's wonderful. So I'll go to group 8. I think Zakia, you're with us. You also have 2 minutes if you can introduce yourself, your group, and very briefly about your project.
Problem, my network is not stable. It is from group 8, and myself, Ziya currently working as a lecturer at the Department of Environmental Science and Industrial Management from Program Science of Bangladesh. And we have 2 other members. Ms. Sarah Nandudu, she is working as a national coordinator at Slum Dwellers International, Uganda. And another member is Hamida Akhtar. She is currently a student of final year at the Department of Environmental Science at Jammu University. So in our team, we are from 2 countries. 2 of us from
Sorry,
Bangladesh.
Zakia, we can't really hear you properly. If you can go a little closer to the mic, maybe.
Yes. Is it okay now?
Or maybe just, make it louder, your sound of your phone or device, whatever you're using.
Okay now.
I think it's better, yes. Go ahead, please.
So from our group, we are from 2 countries, Bangladesh and Uganda. And our project title is Collective Learning and Locally Led Adaptation in Urban Informal Settlements in the face of climate change. Basically, a brief background is that in Asia and Africa, urban informal settlements are the major issue due to rapid urbanization, and here these urban poor communities, the urban slums, they suffer from a lack of the urban amenities. And these urban informal settlements that accommodate more than 800 million people in the world, so they need to be resilient through capacity building. Make them resilient. They have different adaptation strategies in the face of climate change, and in different countries they have different strategies at the community level. So our project concept is to learn by knowledge sharing. That means what the community people they their adaptation strategies to cope with this climate change. And as this is there are two different countries, and their the adaptation strategies might be different. So our main component is knowledge sharing, first learning and then sharing. And in order to do this, we have arranged different online events, mostly the webinars, to share this knowledge. And already we have completed webinars. They are the community people of Uganda, Islam community. They share their real life experience and also adaptation strategies. And next step, we are going to plan for the dissemination session. In this session, we will try to share our findings what we have got from the webinars.
Thank you. Thank you, Zakia.
Project.
Thank you. I'll come back to you later. So if anyone has struggled to listen to Zakia, maybe very quickly I can summarize that the group, the countries within the groups are Bangladesh and Uganda. So the member from Uganda is actually the national coordinator of Slum Dwellers International at Uganda, and Slum Dwellers International is really a large network of informal workers or communities at urban areas. So basically the idea is to learn from this vast experience of SDI based in the urban informal settlements and sort of capture those knowledges and ideas and implement those in Bangladesh slum context as well. So basically they're working or targeting on knowledge management and using the online platform and conducting different webinars and workshops to actually learn from each other. Okay, so I'll move on to group 11. Maybe Jacqueline, if you are here with us, maybe you could also introduce your group and very briefly in 2 minutes mention about your project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jacqueline. So I'm going to present the project, which is climate change adaptation and gender, coping with the climate risks by empowering women in the mountains. As the name suggests, so we are focusing on the gender and how by empowering the women, so we can work towards the climate adaptation. And our focus area is mountains in India and Nepal. So in that between, let me introduce my team members. So I'm Jacqueline, I'm based in India. I work as a regional focal point for Children Youth Major Group. And I have Krishna, who is the chairman of YFeed Foundation based in Nepal, and Anish, who is the executive director of YFeed Foundation. So our focused area is a small group of women, both based in the mountains of India and Nepal. And we believe, as mentioned previously by you in other presentation, like climate adaptations and gender are most important, and we do learn from them because they do have the learnings from the past and how they adapt to it. So firstly, we would be documenting their self-initiative, how they are actively working towards adapting to the climate change. And the other trains are building the capacity of the women and building a networks of women in both the countries. As it is being said, like we tend to discuss in the conferences, but once we go back, we tend to lose the ideas. But that is also there at the ground level, because we tend to talk about gender and climate adaptations, climate change. But it's very important, like we build the network so that they continuously can help each other and grow together. The other aspects are building the livelihood and more focused with the agro-diversity products so that it's sustainable and they can have a sustainable income. So this is the brief about the project. So thank you so much. We'll be happy to answer if there is any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. I'll quickly move on to maybe Taichung, if you are with us, very briefly, just about your project and your group.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Shireen Apu. So I'm representing Group 20. The project name is Kabalung, means the earth, a learning hub for enhancing adaptive capacity of indigenous communities in Bangladesh. So the idea of the project is that indigenous people's livelihood is, as you know, closely connected to nature, and they're also among the major victims to the negative effect of climate change. Yet there is limited awareness of climate change among them. So in these circumstances, the proposed project aims to establish a climate learning hub called Kabalung for indigenous children. This climate learning hub intends to enhance community resilience by training and building indigenous children's knowledge base on climate change and adaptation. So we're 4 members in our group, and we're all Bangladeshis. I'm Lathoy Marma. I'm a co-founder of Community Resource Development Center, and this is a grassroots level organization. And Doki Marma, she is a student, and she is a female participant of our group. Then Iktikharul Islam is a senior lecturer of university. Faisal Rahman, a postdoctoral researcher of Durham University. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll come back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, I'll go to Diana from Group 33 to really, quickly, what you need to say.
Yes, thank you, Shireen. So yes, basically our project is called Networks of Nature, Integrating Urban Farming in the City Fabric. We are representing 3 countries, Indonesia, Singapore, and Philippines. We have Inda, Christopher, and Aya, and myself. So the 3 organizations have different expertise on urban farming. In the case of my organization, Near Landscape, we have expertise on neuroscientific research and urban design. And in the case of Christopher Abreu, and his organization has expertise on technical assistance in architecture, participatory design, helping the urban poor in the Philippines. So our project basically aims to create an e-learning platform that will teach people how to start urban gardening in their fields and understanding the benefits of this activity, especially from a mental health perspective. So we are trying to also gain the skills and knowledge of urban architecture. So we are merging these 3 big spheres or knowledge that we have, which is urban gardening, mental health and well-being, and architecture, applied architecture with different techniques. And this will be available in an online e-learning platform. Basically, this is the overall picture of the project.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you all the group members. Maybe I would start the discussion with a very interesting discussion that's going on in the chat box, that whether these small seed fundings are enough to, create a long-term impact, or do they really have the potential to create a long-term impact? So maybe I'll go back to Melanie, if you can reflect on this, argument, or maybe you could say how actually you are going to take it forward, take the project forward beyond the small grant. So what are your plans when the small grant actually ends, and how you are going to expand this idea or project forward in long term?
Okay, thank you. As a team, we believe that the networks will form, will continue, will be able to still share information between the three countries. And of course, we're going to have a platform where this information that we are gathering from the various countries will be deposited and be shared with our other counterparts across the networks. And we believe this will be a continuous process. For us in Zambia, we also have a platform that we use with our youth, which is known as the KYC TV, where youth continue to collect stories about what is going on in their communities, both the negatives and the positives, what they have managed to do, the engagements with governments, the solutions that they are bringing from communities, and being able to share that. So I think even beyond the project, I think it's a catalyst for us to network and share, and I think it will encourage us to continue beyond that.
Thank you. I think you have put the right word, that it's a catalyst only to work further. So it's just paving the way for the next step. So I really hope that it actually works this way and helps you to move forward with your idea. Does anyone else wants to reflect on this idea, maybe from any other group member, like how you're planning to take this idea forward even if the grant ends? Anyone? You can unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, I'm sharing mine camera.
Yes.
So in our project, we're going to develop a module, a learning module for the kids, the youngs who we're going to aware. So we will, the module will be followed even after the project ends. We will try to provide the module to different institutions. Then we will also publish a publication on the learnings and on the knowledge that we have gathered from the local communities. And the publication will be published to the newspapers, and also we will provide them to different institutions as well. And then we will do social media promotion, where we will try to engage all the young indigenous students of Bangladesh. Then we will also, maybe if possible, we will explore other funding opportunities so that we can do this properly. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Zakiapa, would you like to come?
The connecting research is also another part of our project, and it's about for 1 year, and it's not enough for any research publication. So the more time after ending of this project. Also, another team member from group 33, Diana, is also interested in our project, so we can do collaborative research then.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. So beyond the each group's activity, we are also hosting a monthly meeting where we are bringing all the groups together, and they are really sharing about their project, their successes, and the challenges they are facing throughout the process. So there is also a scope of mutual learning from each other. And as Zakia said, some groups have also really showed interest to other groups' activities. So going forward, since they have built this network, they can also collaborate with each other and seek for some bigger funds, or work by their own at their own community level. Speaking of the network and partnership, I would like to ask a questions to you all. Maybe I can start with Diana if she wants to respond. That how is actually this partnership is strengthening the peer-to-peer learning, or partnership, the multi-country partnership, and how it is actually helping you to build better and going forward.
Yes, actually, this is a great opportunity to get to know projects in other countries, and also learning from the different experiences that the other organizations have has been actually quite inspiring. And I think also, as you mentioned, of course, within my group, we all have managed to build a really interesting relationship, very cooperative, and it's really interesting to see how we all managed to find a balance and nurture all the process, learning from each other expertise. But I think also you mentioned about the meetings, monthly meetings we have with everyone, and it's been really interesting to know from every single other group and the approaches that are being taken. So I think it's a very learning, it's a huge learning process, and we are constantly updating with what others are doing. So I think it's been an excellent experience to learn not only from our own group, but from the others. So I think it will be taken forward in terms of what we are aiming to do, and also learning from others.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to reflect on that? Maybe I can take a couple or one, maybe. How the initiative is actually.
To add,
yes.
In our groups, also the other groups, we have different professionals. All these professionals, they have different expertise. So we can learn from each other. And as you already mentioned, that we have a monthly meeting. It's one in a month. So this is also an opportunity to learn from their learning that help us. And also we have within our group, we have also an organization which is Islam Developers International, and they are broadly working with these urban poor communities. And Bangladesh is not a partner of this network. This is also an opportunity to work with them and learn from their practices, what they are doing. They are working in 32 different countries and actively maybe in 15 countries. So we can be the partner and we can learn from them.
Thank you, Zakiapa. I think we had a question from Melvin like that. Our understanding of small grants through the Global Alliance on Green and Gender Action is quite different, where it's really about easily accessible funds for women-led and youth-led groups, CBOs, smaller NGOs. In line with Vincent's questions, which gap does the small grants program seeks to address? Okay, I think that's a really good question. So I can share my perspective first of all, and then I can go to others. Maybe the first gap that we are trying to, bridge or maybe cover is that, as Sajin mentioned in his presentation, that even if almost all the governments have some process in line to decentralize finance at the local level to build their adaptive capacities, or form some nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based solution or whatever. But in most cases, particularly in countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, or maybe some African countries as well, that these funds actually don't rightly go to the most targeted group of people, or even if they go, they actually sometimes they are not provided with the actual skill sets or opportunities to use them rightly. In most cases, actually, the fund don't really go through that way. So we actually thought we are directly going through the grassroots networks, the community of practice, and really bringing them and with other stakeholders like researchers, academicians, practitioners, so that they can mutually learn and come on a place on a common agenda, and then can implement that common agenda with that fund. Because we all know that we all have some lackings, like the researchers can do really good research modelings, but they really need that grassroots level data, or that real level data that can only be brought by the local communities. And again, the communities have those data, but many a times they don't have access to technology or knowledge, information to bring that data or bring those stories forward. So it's really an amalgamation of all these skills together and building partnerships so that the grant they're using are used on right track. That's my understanding, but I will leave that up to anyone else as well. So what are your thinking, like how the small grants is making a difference? Like what gap it is actually addressing other than the conventional process of funding. Does anyone want to respond to that? Maybe Jacqueline or Anish, I haven't gone to any of you for a while.
Thank you so much. So responding to the question, so as Gulshan mentioned, I'll just try to add to it. So what happens? We're all trying to centralize all the funding and the initiatives, but somewhere when we talk about working at the most lowest level of affected or vulnerable societies, or the most affected gaps in the community, exactly. So this small grants really helps, because it's from the small initiatives and very concrete initiatives we can build up step by step, creating a huge difference in the community and towards our larger society and our country. So this small grants will be the best concrete small step towards it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question from Vincent. I think I have 5 more minutes. I think I can take 1 or 2 questions. So Vincent is saying, can the small grants program therefore build the capacity and profile of small organizations to increase their potential to engage with local policymakers or better access government funding as part of the bottom-up process? Maybe Melanie, you can respond to that, because I think you are the most experienced one, working on grassroots. Melanie?
Hello, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay.
Yes. Did you get the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we believe that the small grants do bring a lot to communities and enable them to be able to engage with the different stakeholders, particularly with local authorities. I think our engagement has already started for Zambia, as well as Tanzania, as well as Bangladesh. And it has been at different levels, at a local level, at central government level, and also at a global level. Just last week, one of our group members met with the president of COP26, and he even tweeted something about how it is important that the youths are heard, and that they get the necessary voice that they need. So I think these small grants do give young people and other grassroots communities an opportunity to have that level of engagement. It can start small, but in small things, it grows and it goes to a higher.
Thank you, Melanie. I think you're getting cut off, but we got your point. And it's really thrilling to know that one of your group members is actually, making a mark and meeting the high-level champions. I guess that's huge. And I think that's, Vincent, that's one of the, I would say, marks that this small grants is also trying to, help to nurture these leaders who have already the capabilities and have already made some marks, but we are giving really, small push to them to, maybe move further ahead and, continue doing what they are doing. It's just an addition to, what they actually have on the ground, just a little bit to push a little bit further so that they can go one step further and, apply for others. I can talk about group 11, which is the, Nepal and India group. I know that they are already planning to, develop this idea further, and they have also applied for, some big grants, building onto this idea. So maybe Anish or Jacqueline, if you can talk a little bit about that, because I know that you have already started building on this idea and, started applying for other funds, right?
Yes. So coming to the increasing the engagement and expanding the ideas. So we got interest from other Asia Pacific INGOs, and also with the should this government go? So they really like the idea. We are really in the talk of how to expand this small grant project, because now as we see, and I also has been mentioned, like gender and climate adaptation is one very important aspect, and we need to focus on it, and we need to focus on at the basic ground level as a bottom-up approach. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question. I would like to go to group 33, maybe Diana or whoever wants to respond. That your idea is actually very interesting one, urban farming, and that touch bases, climate adaptation, environment, pollution on so many angles. So what are your plans to, expand your project beyond the timeline? And do you have any plans to collaborate with local government at any given point? Very briefly, I think in one or
Hi, Shireen. I think Inda would love to answer this question. Inda, if you're there.
Yes, hello. Yeah, so our plan to collaborate with the local government is we already started. So we have also the consultation with the local government, and they are very open with our ideas. And yeah, because in Indonesia, the project is started in the Purwakarta, it's near to the capital city, and the Regency also giving a big support. And we also have a collaboration to start the demo plots with several crops. And yeah, we also have this publication through the local newspaper and also in the social media. And yeah, we plan also to have a replication in other city. And I think that also can be implemented in other countries such as Singapore or Philippines. Yeah, it depends on the situation in each areas.
Thank you so much, Inda. I think you have touched a very good point. I mean, replication of a model is also extremely important. So contexts are similar in your region. So if this pilot project actually works well, so you can definitely replicate that in similar contexts in other countries. And then I am really hopeful that your collaboration with the local governments will also be effective, and going forward, you will be able to, have a bigger mark on the ground. Thank you. With that, I would like to end this session and hand it over to Yoko. I think my time's up, right?
Yes, thank you, Shireen. That was a rich discussion, and thank you for to everyone who shared their experiences. I think it was super interesting. So I want to start kind of transitioning us to think really about solutions on how can we make sure that local climate finance is reaching local levels. And I think that from what we've heard in the presentations and discussions, this is one funding issue, that there's enough funds, but another one is an issue on governance and capacity. So I want to start out by kind of structuring this question around two main points. One, and since it seems like a lot of us are practitioners, according to the poll in the beginning, how can practitioners support local government so that they can invest in communities? And then the second part on what I think we've already started discussing on what are the mechanisms that we need to scale community-led solutions for climate adaptation. So I think I might start with the first point on how can we as practitioners support local governments. And because of the internet connectivity issues, Mr. Krishna Human Gaing from the Ministry of Federal Affairs and General Administration of Nepal has sent a comment to me. So I'm just going to read this for him since the connection is not great. So his answer on supporting local governments is that the national government, one of the major roles they have is to really support their policy and planning formulation, and to really lay out what is the local government role in financing activities related to climate adaptation. And he says that, collaboration with development partners, which is, I think, what a lot of us are working in as organizations, to support the national governments of countries if there are similar initiatives going on, to support the rollout of capacity training to ensure that local governments understand disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation and are able to devise policies, but also create activities and be able to actually roll out the activities for the communities. Okay, so I think I want, since we have a quite engaged and really lively discussion in the chat box as well, I want to open the floor, and please feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you if you have any thoughts on how practitioners can help local governments to better invest in climate change. And how can we bring climate finance to communities through local governments? So I see Madan, please go ahead. And please do unmute yourself when you're speaking because you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Madan Pariyar from Nepal. I work, I'm associated with IDE. This is an NGO working in Nepal. The best way to get them engaged in these, practices is to, our experience is to bring them to the areas where we have worked actually. Say, with our projects, we did some, pilot works in some areas in the community, and we try to bring those government people and see what has really happened there, how the adaptation has taken place, how communities were involved, and whether the investments that they have that has been made is worth for them also to replicate in other areas also. So that is a very important thing that I think for us to help them, let them see themselves, let them get convinced. Now, one of the things that I want to tell you that we try to disseminate a local early warning systems, in an area, in a locality which has a capacity of about 5 kilometer radius. It used to give some forecast for rainfall or temperature and whatever it is. So we brought the local government people there from different areas and to let the farmers tell how that has helped. That they said that there was a forecast that there will be a rain in 2-3 days time, and the farmers had a wheat crop ready for harvest. So they hurriedly, they brought the crop and they harvested the crop, and they really found that if there was no harvest, the crop would have ruined, because of the rains. So these sort of things, when the farmers, they utter from their mouth to the local government people, they are convinced, and now there are plans to disseminate, to promote this through their own funding in many other municipalities. They have promised, and they are convinced to do that. So this is one of the best ways, one of the ways that should be considered actually for promotion, for engaging local governments in community-based climate adaptation, funding.
Great, thank you so much, Madan. I think it was a great point on exposure and the facilitative role us as practitioners can play. So next, I think we have Sarah Nandudu. Please do unmute yourself when you're speaking if you are.
Okay. Thank you very much, and
Hi, Sarah. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but I think I'm afraid we can't hear you.
Look at me. Hello? Hello?
Hi. Oh, okay. I think we can hear you now. We couldn't hear you at all before.
Okay. I'd love to support communities. there is a very big disconnect with communities and governments. So there is need to first create platforms of sharing information about climate change issues. And then these platforms will help them to share together before the support can be given, so that can be given to support local communities. Because as it is, government has stringent ways it works. And when it is there to receive resources, it's very difficult for the resources to flow down to communities. So unless we put modalities that bring these people together, a forum that brings them to share together, have information together, understand the climate change issues together, it is very difficult, even when practitioners support local governments to support communities, because then they have bureaucracies they follow. And these bureaucracies are the reason why you find that local people do not access resources which go through governments, because they are a bit restricted and very tight. So communities are always failing to access such resources. That's what I can share.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. We have Shireen.
Yes, so I just wanted to add with what Sarah has rightly mentioned, that we lack the platforms, first of all, where both local government representatives and community representatives can talk and really discuss. But before that, I think that there is a lack of legitimization of the data or the information that these grassroots communities actually bring, because in most cases, local governments or maybe people, sitting at the policy making decision, they in most cases think that the local communities are always on the victim side. They don't have any capabilities to build adaptive measures or make a mark. So there is a need for change of that perspective. First of all, I would say the local government first think grassroots groups or organizations as partners first, as opposed to beneficiaries. So when they can think themselves that these communities as partners, only then they can work together and collaborate. And second is obviously they need to also legitimate the status and the data that the grassroots networks provides. And thirdly, there is a need to have a platform or more and more sessions, like this, where we can bring representatives like Mr. Krishna from different local governments, and then we could have people like Sarah and Melanie and so much of them from communities, so that they can have a platform and really discuss about whatever the issue is, really frankly and honestly. So I think that is a very important thing to mention and discuss. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. And before we move on to the next part on mechanisms for scaling community-led incentives, I wanted to run by Sajan, who presented earlier on local government financing, especially with your work and engagements with local governments. Are there any things that have not been mentioned so far that practitioners can be doing to support local governments in accessing and spending climate finance for communities?
Certainly, Yuko. So as a practitioner, what we have seen is like climate finance is seen as a highly technical issue for local governments. But as a practitioner, our role is to be facilitating and to formulate and translate this technical to easily adaptable and understandable terms, so that the local governments can prioritize and focus on the needs of the improved investment or increased investment in local level adaptation efforts on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. This will also align with the national government efforts on capacity building. Like Krishna already said, like the national government has been focusing on capacity building of local authorities. So aligning with the national government's efforts, we can focus on operationalization and interpretation of the policies, laws, and guidelines, so that it will ensure the community understanding of these policies and increase the participation as well as. And next part is like climate finance is not just a finance issue. So we can take this as a governance issue. We should take this as a governance issue, because local governments need to know how to spend funds, especially because Governance process take a longer time, and we practitioners should advocate with donors and funding organizations on the need for longer term programs so that the effective climate finance can be enabled at the local level, authorities and local level government institution, where they directly work with the community and what the needs are perceived, and where they are able to cater the community demands and requirements on overall climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Sajan. I think we had a couple of interesting recommendations, which I will bring together in the end. But we'll move us along to the next kind of part on climate finances. What are the mechanisms appropriate to be able to scale these community-led solutions that we heard about in these presentations? So, you know, one issue is funds, but if, you know, there's a lot of money, all of a sudden, like $10,000, $100,000 that can be directly funded to communities, though, but, you know, I'm assuming there are challenges, as we've heard, on governance issues, on being able to spend, being able to access these funds. So, you know, what can we be doing to be supporting mechanisms to really scale these community-led solutions? I want to open the floor to everyone. Please feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you. Melanie, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Maybe I'll just like to share, like within our network, my network is unstable. I hope you'll be able to hear me. Okay, yes, I think what's important is to have partnerships, building partnerships. For example, within the SDI network, we have where communities and local authorities have come up with what they call the city funds. So these are resources that are brought together, resources from the community, resources from cooperating partners, and resources from the local authority. And then these resources are combined and then channeled towards the development activities that need to be undertaken. And this has proved to work. And I think even for climate adaptation, we could take a similar approach where communities are also taken as part of the development process and not just beneficiaries, so they can also bring their resources to the table and combine the resources from the various channels and brought together. I think this has also worked in areas like in Zambia, where we worked together with the local authority, brought in their resources, the community volunteers came on board, and also the local authority brought in their engineers. And we found that when they did, it was a drainage system, and bringing that together resulted in the cost of the whole drainage system being reduced by a huge amount, other than getting a contractor who would have charged maybe thousands and thousands of kwachas or in dollars. It would have been way beyond, but because people came together, they collaborated, and that helped to reduce the cost and also brought about a lot of learning from the process.
Thank you so much. I actually have a follow-up to your really interesting point. The point about the importance of building partnerships, I think, is very well taken. From your experience, is this something that can happen organically once you have received the funds, or is this something that there needs to be some kind of catalytic support or some way to facilitate this? Or do you think that this can happen just organically from the communities?
I think there needs to be a process of engagement. There needs to be a building of trust and also transparency and accountability. So I think those are very important issues that need to be brought to the table before this whole collaboration and partnerships can flourish.
Great. And not to keep pressing you just because you have a lot of interesting ideas, who do you think is positioned to do this? because it seems like it is building trust with the communities, but then who is, best placed to do this, to be able to, build the trust and accountability and then go to the next step of building partnerships?
What happens, I think, with the communities, from the communities, and I think it's important that the communities get organized, and we also have like leaders within the community that can come up, as well as the technocrats that are able to also open doors and be able to create those platforms and support communities to engage at a higher level. Because sometimes you find that there are these barriers. When they hear it's a community member, some institutions don't even want to open the door to them until that sort of relationship is built. And then you find that people open up and get to understand that community members do have a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, and then we begin to have that relationship and build the trust that is there from both ends. And also communities want to have trust in the partner that they're going to work with, because they also don't want to bring their resources to the table and then things go wrong and you hear that the resources were misdirected or that kind of thing.
Great, thanks so much, Melanie. I think since we do kind of want to have different perspectives, I recall when we had the poll in the very beginning, we had representation from the donor community as well, who I think is also a key player. I don't know who that is, and I don't know if they're still on the call, but if you are, it'd be really interesting to get some of your reflections on the session regarding climate finance. And if you're not present or you're not comfortable, we can move on. Okay, so maybe not here anymore. So we actually have a follow-up to this question from Barry on how can we be operationalizing accountability and transparency without increasing bureaucracy and reporting for the communities. I think this is a really important question because, I mean, we all have gone through receiving finance for climate adaptation activities, but it's not something that is often doable at the community level when we are asked for the level of accountability and transparency, often from donors, for example. If you have any thoughts on this question, how can we operationalize accountability and transparency so that it's still accessible for the communities? Madan, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think I just want to share the experiences again from Nepal of commercial pocket approach. Actually, we call it a commercial pocket approach, very successful approach, which was developed under Anukundan Breast program, where farmers, a group of farmers, they come together, they operate a collection center where their high value produce are collected and then marketed from there. And they have their own representatives. Actually, they have executive officers, their own bodies who are operating the collection centers, and they are the ones who are negotiating with the local governments, with different stakeholders, private sectors, and that's how and there is a complete transparency of the funds that is received there, and that's how they're accountable to the farmers, to the members, and to the local government people. And it has been a very, very successful model which has improved the livelihood of poor farmers. It has also attracted funding from local governments, and it has also been able to develop a lot of private sector entrepreneurs in those areas for supplies of inputs and also for output trading.
Great, thank you, Madan. I think that's a really important point. Fajan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, adding to the point on Barry's question and adding to the echoing Madan's voice also. So like our experience is that we work mostly with the community-based disaster management committees, CDMCs, where CDMCs, they based on the local level planning operation guidelines. So they form and design the activities based on their needs identified, and they themselves also contribute from their side. Like we have most of the activities we do on leveraging the resources from the community as well as matching it with the local government fund annually that the local governments provide. So here we can see like once the CDMCs, like the Community Disaster Management Committees, come in front while planning and designing, we can see like since they have their share or they have their leveraged percentage on the activities, we can see high level of community ownership and also accountability and transparency within the as led by the CDMC, rather than somebody else from the other area who will be taking the activity, who will be implementing the activity on behalf of the community. So small scale opportunities or small scale small scale climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction efforts should always be prioritized or should always be handled by these small community-led groups, so that we can ensure their participation as well as most level of accountability and transparency on this on the financial aspect as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think kind of related to the question that we are discussing on what are the mechanisms that can scale community-led solutions. We have a really interesting question from Vincent in the chat box that asks, can small grants programs, or I guess these kind of catalytic funds, build the capacity and profile of small organizations to increase their potential to engage with local policymakers and better access government funding as part of a bottom-up demand-led approach? I think maybe this, I mean, anyone in the audience, of course, can answer. And also if people, if the team from the small grants program also had any ideas, it would be great to know. I'm gonna retype the question so people can see it again.
Hi, I think that was partly answered in the last segment, and I think Melanie has responded to that. Like, this is, you know, how this is building a platform or a base for them to, you know, plan further. Or, you know, they are using this as a catalyst to, you know, form these networks or groups, or, you know, share knowledges and everything. And then based on that, some groups are trying to, you know, partner with local government and, you know, expand their, you know, exposure and their projects. Some are trying to, you know, come up with some knowledge products or publish research articles so that that can also be a knowledge product and, you know, be helpful for others. And some groups are also already building on these ideas and, you know, applying for bigger funds. So I think this is really a catalytic and, you know, forming the base for them to, you know, go further. I think that way it is, you know, building their capacities in one way.
Great. And do you think from your experience that this kind of capacity building component needs to be intentionally built in, or this is something that can organically happen within communities after they've, you know, received the grant? I guess also because of Shireen, your role in managing this program would be interesting to hear.
My perspective is that in almost all the cases, all the projects, when we're dealing with, you know, grassroots communities or grassroots organizations, there should be intentionally a capacity building angle to it, because, you know, we can't just really, you know, look into a project and, you know, the whole initiative gets ended when the project ends. We should have something with it built in the project that, you know, builds their capacity so that they can take it forward and also, you know, work something on their own. As someone was saying, like, replicate the model. So if they can, you know, build those capacities so that they can, even if the project ends or any grant ends, they can also utilize those experience, those skills, I think, somewhere else. So I think there is need for intentionally having a capacity building angle or component within a project.
Thank you so much, Shireen. Would anyone from the Small Grants Program also be interested to answer this question on your personal experience of maybe challenges and opportunities to actually scale your activities? Okay, maybe not. That's totally fine. I think we're at time anyway, so I want to kind of go into a closing for this session. Thank you everyone for joining. I think through the discussion and ideas from the audience, we had two main points, which I think had been discussed also in other sessions, but of how we really need to be looking at climate finance is not just the funding issue of money, but also on a governance issue on how to spend and how we as practitioners or governments can be taking part in this. And in the last discussion on the point of how we as practitioners can support local governments, there were points from the group on bringing the local government stakeholders to actually the areas where they work to really share information and see what kinds of activities are in need and also what is working. So having a facilitative role on sharing information between communities and local governments. I think there was another point on, supporting the governments and aligning with their policies and providing technical knowledge and skills building on that front. And as NGOs or practitioners, were often kind of placed between the donor environment and also the communities, and how we can be advocating for longer term finance for a lot of these programs, because if we consider climate finance to be a governance issue, governance takes time. And then to the point about mechanisms to scale community-led solutions, there was a really, I think, a repeated point from the community grassroots organizations on the importance of building partnerships. And I think we heard from the presenters on how a small grant or kind of seed funding really supported the organizations to build these partnerships. But there is still that kind of, I think, difficult balance of having the trust and accountability of the funding so that it's not a burden on communities to actually report against them. But I think there was an important point by Melanie and also Shireen and others on how we need to be intentional about building in capacity building for grassroots organizations or communities, so that the catalytic funds don't just end with a short-term investment, and that there's intentional skills and network building to be able to connect to the broader ecosystem, whether it's local institutions or local governments, or maybe larger scale NGOs, for example, to be able to scale their ideas and solutions that are working well. So I really learned a lot from everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We are really happy for this fruitful discussion. Thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your night or morning and continue to enjoy the CBA session. Thank you.